Okay, it is 8 o'clock. And I guess we will go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome everyone to the, I have to mute some of my chat windows. Anyway, let me try again. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the IETF Newcomers Overview. This is just a short webinar to get you prepared and hopefully answer any questions that you have. First of all, I am Karen O'Donoghue. I'm a longtime participant in the IETF, chair of a couple working groups, and have been involved in the education type activities for a while. And our co-presenter today, Rich, did you want to introduce yourself? I can't hear you, Rich. Oh, there we go. Now I hear you.
Of course. Sorry. Yeah, my name is Rich Sauls. I'll be presenting the middle section today, and been doing this tutorial as a webinar and online for a couple of years now. And glad to be here.
Excellent. All right. So welcome to the IETF. I'm assuming this is the first time for most of you that are on here. The first thing about the IETF is we have something called the IETF Notewell, and you will have possibly read it or acknowledged it when you registered for the meeting. And this is our basically set of rules and procedures that we need to follow. All of the policies that are in effect. It covers things such as our anti-harassment policy, our code of conduct, also IPR rules, patents and participation, and those kinds of things. So this is the set of at the beginning of every working group session, you will be presented with this and reminded of this. It is the governing set of rules for our organization. The next thing I'd like to highlight specifically for newcomers are a set of activities that we have at the upcoming IETF, specifically to get you up to speed. There will be a newcomers tutorial on Sunday afternoon. It's actually it's the same set of slides. Sometimes the questions are a little bit different, but it's the same information that you'll be getting today. Slightly different set of presenters. If you have additional questions, it might be useful to go again. Otherwise, you can probably skip that one. The IETF Quick Connections is it's a 1 hour session. It's sort of short one-on-one conversations. We do ask that you sign up for that in advance. But it is an opportunity to have, sort of like 3 to 5 minute conversations, basically with a number of different experienced IETFers. You can ask them any questions that you have. It seems like a little bit of an odd type of an activity, but it seems to work really well. We do have a mentoring program called IETF Guides. If you would like, some people come and they're already well familiar with the IETF and they have colleagues. Others would like to have a mentor to help get them started. And there's information on the guides program. There is a newcomers dinner on Monday night that's strictly informal. It's organized by the Secretariat that runs the meeting. It's a small cost to cover your food, but it's very informal for newcomers to get to know each other. And then finally, we do have a feedback session on Thursday, and we are really interested in your feedback on how we can make this our newcomer set of activities more effective. Moving on to this presentation itself. The scope of this presentation is not the entire history of the IETF. It is specifically about the basic set of information that you need to help start your participation in the IETF. What is immediately useful to you as you get started, and strategies that will hopefully make the most of your meeting. There is a set, it's a little bit dated at this point, but this YouTube channel has this playlist. Scott Bradner, a longtime participant in the IETF and leader of the community, did a whole series of tutorials on the history and the various process pieces of the IETF. A few of them need to be updated, but it is a very comprehensive set of information. All right, so the next step is IETF and related organizations. So the mission of the IETF is basically to make the internet better by producing good standards, high quality, relevant technical documents that have an impact on the way people design, manage, and use the internet. This mission has been around for quite a while. So what exactly is the IETF? It is an international standards development organization. You may be familiar with other standards development organizations like IEEE or ITU, ANSI, ETSI. There's a number of standards organizations out there. The IETF is self-selected individual participants in the sense that there's no formal membership. So your participation is not based on the company that you work for or the number of meetings that you've attended. We don't do any formal voting. We do hum to determine consensus, and there'll be another slide a little bit later about consensus and humming and all of that. There's also no formal government role, so it's not like the ITU in that sense. It's driven by market-based adoption, so we don't mandate the use of any of the standards. We develop the specifications and we publish them, and then it's up to the market to actually take them and develop them and deploy them. It's focused on internet technologies, sort of goes without saying, I guess, and it is bottom up and quite unique in the world of standards at this point. The IETF is currently divided into a number of areas that group the work into areas that are similar. We currently have 7 areas, and we have applications in real time. So, the SIP and the voice conferencing and those kinds of things fall into that category. Transport, so TCP, UDP, QUIC, those kinds of things fall into the transport area. Routing, obviously the core of the internet, the routing protocols. The internet area has a lot of your, if you go with the historical layering model, IPv4, IPv6. It also has the technologies that are a little bit lower than that and connect into that. Ops and management are operationally related working groups, and network management types of working groups are in there. Security, there's a large number of working groups associated with security. So TLS, ACME for certificate-based things, a whole bunch related to authentication, OAuth, COSI, a number of ones that are related to web-based authentication and non-web-based authentication. And finally, the general area, which basically has all of the other things. So the general area tends to not have a lot of working groups in it. There is one, I don't know if it's actually meeting this time or not. I didn't think to look at it right now. It's the IASA working group, which is looking at reorganizing the administrative structure of the IETF. So the working groups around the administrative structure and those kinds of things fall into the general area. So I alluded to this earlier about the IETF and consensus. The IETF motto, I guess, has been over the years that we reject kings, presidents, and voting, and that we believe in rough consensus and running code. Everything has, there's the ideal and then there's sort of the reality. So rough consensus is basically that you move something forward or you've achieved rough consensus when all of the issues have been addressed, but they may not necessarily have been accommodated. So a working group can have rough consensus to move ahead, even though somebody has raised an outstanding issue that has not actually been accommodated. So everybody has, dissenting opinions are heard, but they don't necessarily stop the work. We use humming as a way to measure consensus. And I always wondered about this myself, what is the point of humming? And, even some of the articles in the popular press sometimes that talk about the IETF mention humming as this weird behavior that the IETF does. But it actually is a way to measure, not only, whether people feel one way or the other based on an issue, but also how passionately they feel about it. So if you have, you ask for the consensus of the room and you get this sort of, meek, not very passionate hum, that people are in favor of it, but they're not really that passionate about it. Whereas if it's it's a really controversial issue, and we've seen this sometimes where you'll have, people humming as loud as they can. This is something that, if they had several votes, they would be voting multiple times. So this is where humming comes in. The chair of the session, either the working group chair or whatever the session is, are responsible for building the consensus and judging it based on that. Having said all of that, the bottom line is anything that's actually done in a physical meeting, we take back to the mailing list, and all of the final consensus measurements are done in the context of the mailing list. And in true IETF form, there's actually even a RFC on consensus and humming in the IETF. So that's enough on that. I'm going to speak briefly a little bit about IETF culture. Every organization that I've ever been a part of, every standards group or every professional association, everything has its unique culture, and the IETF is, in that sense, is no different. It is a lot of very passionate, smart, vocal people. It is an informal organization, so informal dress code. People love their T-shirts, and they're very proud of their T-shirts that date back to IETFs many years ago. What we really want to say is that technical excellence is highly valued. And that a number of it's an organization that as time moves on, you develop close working relationships with people. So it's meant to be very technically competent, fun and passionate, but at all times respectful of the individuals. I'll talk a little bit about the organization of the IETF. I haven't been following the chat, so I hope.
Yeah, I'll answer questions, Karen, while you're.
Excellent, thank you. I just realized that I wasn't doing that, but I thought you were. Anyway, so there are, as in most organizations, has a lot of acronyms, and the IETF in this sense is no different. What I've done here is sort of color-coded what you'll see on the badge later. There'll be some dots, but so the IESG is the Internet Engineering Steering Group. So every area in the IETF, we talked about the 7 or 8 areas earlier. Every area has some number of area directors. Most of them have 2, some of them actually have 3. And that group of area directors is the steering group of the IETF. That's the IESG. So on the right of your picture, you'll see the blue area with the IESG and the areas, and then the working groups inside the areas. A parallel organization to the IESG and the IETF is the IRSG, which is the IRTF, which is the Internet Research Task Force. So you have the IETF and the IRTF. So if it's ready to be developed into a protocol specification, it's the IETF. And if it's still sort of a researchy type topic, then it's the IRTF. And the IRTF also has a steering group, and it has a number of research groups. And generally it meets the same, some of these research groups meet in parallel with the IETF. We'll talk more about that later. Separate from that, there's the Internet Architecture Board. This is made up of, I think it's 12 individuals that are selected by a process, by the NOMCOM process, and they handle things, they handle overarching architectural types of issues, and they also handle like appointments to positions, managing liaisons, that kind of thing. They handle those aspects of the IETF. And new this year, we have changed our administrative structure. We now have something called the IETF LLC, and this handles all the administrative affairs of the IETF. So awarding of contracts and payment of, all of the administrative pieces that keep the IETF running. And I think I talked sufficiently through all of this. The IESG does the technical management of the IETF. The IRTF is looking at longer-term research topics that may eventually transition to the IETF. The IAB is oversight of the overall internet architecture and the standards process. The LLC is the administrative body. So those are the four major areas of the IETF. And at this, I'm going to stop and pass it over to Rich, and he'll talk to you a little bit about the IETF week in a nutshell.
Okay, great. Yes, will the deck be available? I see Andrew has. Okay, Karen, you're going to answer questions now? All right,
yes.
So I'll talk about what the week's like in the next 2 weeks from now. Karen will have to wake up periodically to turn the next slide, please. Okay, so from the outside, especially if you just sort of land there in the hotel lobby during the week, it looks like organized. It looks like chaos, but it's actually a lot going on, and it's all very, very organized and scheduled. The schedule of events changes, as they say. We have a final schedule now. But there will be notices and changes up until the day something is supposed to happen. That won't happen for big things like the plenary session, which I'll mention, or a deep dive. But it can often happen that a working group will be canceled at the last minute due to logistics or people just not being interested, or they had 2 sessions and they ended up not needing it, and so on. So the kinds of things that are on the agenda, and the agenda is available online. You probably should have gotten a link or seen the link when you registered. There'll be a link at the end of the page. There's working group sessions. That's the bulk of what we're all about. I'll talk some more about that. Birds of a feather are informal starting things. All of these we'll get into. Most of these we'll cover in subsequent slides. As IRTF, Karen mentioned, is looking at things that don't fit into a neatly solvable problem, let's say. For example, human rights implications and privacy requirements and so on network protocols. There are some that are very good fit and focus for sort of an advanced development team, if you think of it in a commercial environment, such as the Crypto Forum Research Group always comes up. They're the ones, the assigned experts for new crypto algorithms and so on. I'll call out the ANRW. This is an ACM conference. There are invited papers and presentations. You do have to register. I believe it's Monday, Tuesday, but you can it's free with your IETF attendance. The Hackathons and Code Sprints, that's the weekend before, Saturday, Sunday. A hackathon, well, again, I'll talk about that more. Social events, we're having one this time, and the rest of these things we will discuss on subsequent slides. So if you could do the next one, please, Karen. All right, so then there's a lot of things that are not on the agenda. Hallway meetings, and this is, not only is it common, but it's expected. If you have a question or you want to you asked a question or had some discussion and you want to get more involved in it or review things, you'll catch someone who oh, I just, pardon me, I saw you, you came to the mic at the previous session or whatever. Can I talk to you about so-and-so? Hi, my name is Rich. Everyone is approachable. There are aspects of the community that can sometimes be harder to overcome, but there's that. So hallway meetings, we just chat in a hall. There are breaks between every session. Every other break has, coffee, bagels, pastries or something like that. So people mill about and talk. There's what's called a bar boff. This is where a group of people will get together and say, hey, let's go down to that pub over there that I saw and talk about deployment of DNS security options. Then there's marathon editing sessions for often we're developing, the purpose, as Karen mentioned, of the IETF is to develop high quality technical documents that other people can use and implement from. And so often, better than exchanging email or GitHub pull requests for making document changes, you just get 3 or 4 people to sit around a table and what's called wordsmith or even just address fundamental issues. They'll often come back to the working group if it's meeting later in the week and say, okay, this is what we did. Here's how we resolved everything. There is an IETF app available for both Android and Apple. It is your friend. It will carry all of the latest schedule changes. You can highlight things that you care about. It will have on the, it can be added to your calendar, I believe, on the Apple. And it can make your own custom schedule. The agenda online and there in the link is also your friend. There are some last minute changes posted when you register. You can see where they'll post a note on the next. Usually there's a map of the hotel and a schedule and an agenda, and then there'll be a post-it that says, oh, this meeting, working group's canceled. This one decided to meet over here, and so on. Next slide, please. The working group sessions. This is the main part of the week. It is the reason why the week is scheduled. A working group is the basic unit of activity that produces most RFCs. There are research and individual streams, but the stuff that becomes RFC, or what you think of as a standard, is generally done in a working group. That work happens in email lists. Each working group has an email list. As Karen said, there are about 100, or I said there are about 130 working groups. 80 or so of them are meeting this upcoming week, and that means there's hundreds of mailing lists. When a working group closes, the mailing list stays open. Face-to-face meetings are done for solving key issues. So the quick working group, for example, rather than presenting or discussing any possible new work, they're spending all of their time addressing open issues. Think of it as a GitHub issue or a GitHub pull request. The sessions are streamed online and recorded very much like this, using the same MeetEcho facilities and our friendly MeetEcho staff. You'll see, as you can see in this picture, there are, here's a remote presenter. Because everybody in the room, they're all looking at their laptops, occasionally looking up. That happens. The picture on the right is the screen on the right is text. Somebody's presenting some work, and the screen on the left shows somebody presenting via, remote MeetEcho, probably. So the sessions are streamed, recorded, and available afterward. The IETF has a YouTube channel that covers each of the IETF meetings. The charter is what the working group is focused on. That's the area directors, and covering those 8 areas that Karen went through before. The area directors approve the charter. Okay, Andrew, yes, exactly. And next slide. Birds of a feather. It's from the, English-American phrase, birds of a feather flock together. It goes back a long time in the computer industry. And it's an informal gathering, not as structured as a working group meeting, in that while there's a chair, someone is there's probably an agenda and some discussion they want to get through. They're not trying to produce documents. What they're trying to produce is perhaps a working group. They'll discuss the charter, what the group is intended to work on, a rough timetable. Oh, it'll take a year to do this, 2 years to do that, and so on. It generally meets only once. You'll sometimes hear the phrase working group forming or non-working group forming. It can start as a bar BOF, which is not scheduled. Then there's a scheduled BOF, and then there's next thing would be a working group. Looking at figuring out how to spin up a working group without having face-to-face BOF meetings. The discussion. Okay, next slide, please. The IETF sessions. The IETF is a function of the IAB, the Internet Activities Board, Architecture Board. More on research, as I mentioned, a couple of the areas, things like privacy and human rights considerations. There's one on Gaia, how do we get the entire world linked up onto the internet, things like that. There are more focused short-term research things like cryptography algorithms. How do you do a verifiable one-way hash, for example? If that means anything to you, great. If not, there's plenty of other research groups. All of they meet at the same time. They follow much of the same structure, but instead of being a working group, it's a research group, so RG instead of WG. The RC listed there is a useful primer. On the other hand, if you think of it as just, oh, these things are discussing and won't actually result in a standard with bits on the wire, that's probably good enough. Next, ANRW, the Applied Network Research Workshop. So this is becoming revitalized and rescheduled to be co-located with the IETF. So that's pretty cool for a number of reasons. I guess two, both of which are the cross-fertilization. Oh, sorry, my screen went to sleep. For cross-fertilization, so we have a lot of academics talking about theoretical issues with head-of-line blocking in HTTP, or how I can fingerprint how I can fingerprint or identify a host based on its DNS traffic or analysis. And then it brings academics and research to the IETF so that people can learn about the implications and impacts of some of what they're doing. It also brings academics into the IETF. Many of them go to the IRTF groups, but some of them also come to IETF groups because a motivator is getting an RFC published or influencing work. You might see the name Sharon Goldberg. She and her graduate students have been very influential in cryptography, DNS security, NTP, the time protocol security, and so on. Separate registration. You can, anyone, you just have to sign up. And that will probably be ongoing, a yearly thing co-located with the July IETF. Next page. So these are 3 kinds of meetings that also happen, not working group, which might be anywhere from 10 to 50 to, maybe 80 people for the quick or something like, or the first ACME, which I got 120. But these are area-wide sessions. So the areas, transport, routing, security, so on, almost all of them have a meeting or 2 where they will review what their working groups have done. And yeah, I posted my notes to the list, or yes, we're not meeting until tomorrow. That happens. Or another thing that happens in area-wide sessions, they often have dispatch, where someone will say, I have this idea. I think this applies to the routing area. Where should I go? And then a group of people will dispatch that to the appropriate working group. Very useful for newcomers to the IETF to attend those or at least understand that they're there. And anyone can go. It's not just, you don't find just security people at the security group, and you don't find DNS people at the operations group and so on. Plenary is a Latin word that means all attend. And so these are now the border has become more or less strictly defined depending on which meeting it is and how it's organized. There's usually a technical presentation. So we've had Dave Clark, one of the founding architects of the protocols, talk about tilting the playing field appropriately when you're defining a protocol. I remember somebody else talking about, Hannes, I think, talking about trusted computing zones inside, ARM chips or Intel chips. Then there is the administrative part, and this is where that alphabet soup that Karen showed before, they get up and they swap around and talk about, well, these are the things, these are the number of appeals we've had. This is what our attendance is like. This is how many countries are coming to this one. This is what our budget looks like for the next 6 months, and so on. There's often announcements as to where future IETF meetings will be located. As you can imagine, for a meeting that has anywhere between 800 and 1,500 people, you can't just sort of show up at a hotel without, unannounced. And so there's a lot of planning and announcements for that. Next, please. The hackathons and code sprints. So this, when we give the tutorial on Sunday, unfortunately, we have to say, you just missed it. It was really great. But since this is before the meeting, Saturday and Sunday, there's hackathons where people have come together and do independent, interoperable implementation testing. So testing new types of DNS records. TLS 1.3 went through a number of these things where, major implementers, OpenSSL, Facebook, Mozilla, Chrome, all got together and tried to make their clients talk to the servers and so on. So that happens Sunday and Saturday. You register for it, you get a free T-shirt. Lunch is provided. You can just sort of show up, and there is a list on the meeting wiki about what hackathon projects people are working on. It's still not too late to define, add a new one, but you'll probably not get a lot of attendance. Code sprint is just, oops, we jumped there. Okay, thanks. Code sprints are for people developing the IETF tooling. That includes the publishing stuff, the change, how RFCs are generated, how drafts are tracked, and so on. The website, datatracker.ietf.org, which is a newcomer you probably will not care about too much, but by the time you come to your next meeting, or you start to participate in mailing lists, you'll become intimately familiar with parts of the data tracker. Next slide, please. Networking and social events. So the one on the left there is at the Singapore National Aquarium, as I recall. So it's a giant fish tank. We used to have a picture with just this giant octopus pressed up against the glass, but probably a little too intimidating. The event this year is probably not too late to buy social tickets. The quality of them, it varies, but as a way to just, get a free dinner and drinks and meet some people in a social environment, it's worth going to. The one on the right is the IETF Sisters. This is for women, and those present as women in the IETF. It's a social and support group. I'll talk some more about that, or Karen will in the resources in the subsequent slide. There's still more. So we have side meetings. One of the things we're experimenting with is unstructured meeting time. So there's a time slot every morning where there aren't any work groups set, so that people can get together and have informal side discussions. It's an ongoing experiment trying to find out the right place in which to do it. So that's the link there. Tutorials are Sunday afternoon. There's this one. There's one on how to write a security considerations document. In the past, we've had how to, the structure and format of RFCs and so on. Tutorials. So those tutorials. A deep dive is usually someone, deeply entrenched in technology for their job. And so last meeting we had a deep dive on the architecture of modern routers. It's not just a simple look at a packet, send it out kind of thing. Hot RFC is a hot topics. People get 10 minutes to talk about something, and then the idea is to see if there's any interest. Acme got, which is the Let's Encrypt certificate protocol, if you will, and I'm the chair. We got 2 people to come and present at Acme, and one of them is moving forward as a standards document. Also not on this list is Pekakucha, which is a lightweight satirical thing. If you've been on the IETF attendees list, you'll have notices from Aaron Falk. Next, please. So, talk about general behavior, meeting etiquette overall. Read the documents before coming to the session. You don't want to be, the sessions are not tutorials of the documents, and in particular, if a document has been gone through several drafts, a draft is a checkpoint where the version of the document is sort of uploaded to the data tracker, and then people can fetch it and read it. What will be discussed or presented in the front of the room is the changes since the last time. So in order to do that, in order to appreciate that, you should know what happened, what was in the last time, right? And then you can come to the mic and ask clarifying questions or say, well, have you considered this, and so on. Behave respectfully and tolerantly. IETF does not tolerate harassment, and there's a slide on that later on. We're computer people. They're pretty acceptable of people on the, I was going to say the fringe, but who knows what the fringe is. If you look at IETF, it's a good mirror of society. We want to get better. Talk to people, listen to them. We encourage all technical opinions. A lot of these people know each other, so don't be put off maybe by how they have a good time. I'm sorry, how they address each other, and don't feel you have to slide in there and talk all of the lingo. Have a good time and remember to sleep. Meetings start. People will often get together for breakfast at 8:30. Start talking technical stuff all the way through until the last meeting at 5 or 7. Then they'll go out to dinner and or a bar afterwards to keep talking. It's hard to stay focused and technical and organized and bright and smart for 12, 16 hours. But it goes on all the time. Don't feel you have to attend every meeting or every social thing. Next page. Bringing new work to the IETF. So if you have an idea that you don't see covered in the agenda, or you haven't seen a working and you haven't seen a working group devoted to it, here's how to bring in new work. Find some collaborators. So this could be a side meeting, talking to people, saying, "Oh, are you interested in this thing that I want to work on?" Write some kind of document, an initial draft. Maybe have a barb off where you get together people and go, "Hey, I really want to talk about how to use DNS to store PGP keys." I don't know. Talk to the area directors. This is, your chance to find and track them down. They're obviously very busy. There has to be an area director at every working group meeting, so their schedules are pretty booked. But someone, "Hey, I'm interested in discussing this." They might say, "Follow up with me offline," but at least you'll have a connect the name and a face. The next step after area directors approve it is you propose a BOF. The area directors review it, make suggestions. Once it's been accepted, you hold the BOF and consensus will determine the next step, We've had, I know of a couple of BOFs where it was no working group was formed because we couldn't find a good use of the technology, or we didn't feel that if the IETF did anything here, it would be used by industry. And then there have been groups where it's like, oh, why are we even having a BOF? Just let's get the group and start this, and rubber stamp this protocol, right? Just put our imprimatur on this protocol right away. So they span the gamut. And a BOF is, they bring energy and new interest in potential areas to the to work. We had one BOF that was sponsored by the IETF chair at the time, and that didn't go anywhere. So there's no shame or embarrassment about that. Next, please. So during the working groups, that's Yovnir talking. See, I know these people. There will be a mic in every room. The picture before showed, a couple of screens and mic, depending on the size of the room. And the size of the room is set by how many people have attended previous meetings. So we collect all of the information, collect the numbers, and as part of scheduling, say, oh, last 2 times you had 50 people. Why are you asking for 100 people now? But the size of the room will determine how many mics there are. The way discussion works is there's people presenting, and then people line up at the mics to say something. It might be asking a question. It might be saying, have you, a pointed question. It might be, rambling off topic. Hopefully not too much of that. You speak directly into the mic. It's hard. Often you'll hear the crowd going, swallow the mic, meaning you have to be really, really close. Depending on what facilities the hotel has to bring. Say your name every time because people are listening to this remotely. There's also not only the audio and video stream, but there is an instant messaging Jabber room that also goes out and is used by all the folks. The blue sheets provide a record and determine future planning. Any kind of technical comment and questions are welcome. Long, detailed discussions. You say a few points, then you can sort of move right around back to the line if you have more to say. Yes, no, it's not for, you're not a speaker, the mic, but you can make the points, and the discussion will continue as people go back and forth. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will turn it back over to Karen to talk about some of the resources and things that are available. I will be co-presenting this tutorial on Sunday. Feel free to come up during that or at the end of it with any other, if you have other questions that aren't answered here. Karen.
Okay. So the third part of the, excuse me, third part of the tutorial talks a little bit about resources and information. The first thing we're going to talk about is the people. The first set of people that you really want to know are the IETF Secretariat. This is the team of individuals who basically run the meeting. So they do all of the planning, they run the registration systems in advance, they man the registration desk, they handle all of the issues associated with the room. You'll easily be able to find them throughout the week. Very helpful, very important to know. The next set are 2 teams of people that you will, they generally have tables set up in the registration area. The first being the RFC editor staff. So the RFC editor is the team of people that do all of the actual publication once the document is finished. So if you have any questions, if you have a document that you're already working on that's in the process of being published, and you can get help with it on site with the RFC staff. IANA does all of the assigned internet assigned names and numbers, and so if you are looking for an IANA assignment, or you have a question about how to write an IANA considerations for a document, or you just want to understand how IANA works a little bit better, You'll find office hours for both of those sets of staff in the registration area of the IETF. The IETF has an executive director. I believe technically it's currently the interim executive director while they're in the process of redoing all the administrative stuff. And this is Portia, and she'll be around all week. Be able to find her. And then finally, we have an Ombudsteam. Rich alluded to this earlier. We do have an anti-harassment policy, or we have a harassment policy, and we have an Ombudsteam that if you have any issues or you want to talk to somebody about behavior that you have observed or behavior that you have received, then you can talk to any of these individuals, and it's strictly confidential, and they've had all the appropriate training to help you go forward with that. As in any meeting that you've probably ever been to, you will receive a badge. The IETF is very proud of their dots and ribbons. Everything is color-coded to help you determine who the various folks are. There are dots on the badges, and the dots indicate roles like working group chairs or the NOMCOM. We didn't really talk much about the NOMCOM in this presentation because it's not really relevant to attending your first meeting, but the nominations committee, or the NOMCOM, is what selects all of the leadership of the IETF, and they will be wearing orange. IESG, your area directors will have yellow dots. IAB has red dots. IRSG, which is a steering group for the IRTF, they have pink dots. The RFC series editor has a teal dot, and the IETF LLC currently has black dots. There are also some ribbons. Some of the ribbons are like official kinds of ribbons, and others are ribbons that are self-selected. So they generally have a big pile of ribbons that you can self-select. The other thing the IETF generally has is it's a big board of buttons, and basically it started out as a way for people to self-identify if they spoke another language, and that way somebody who was struggling a bit who spoke that language could approach that person. And it has really exploded because it's fascinating how many different languages members of the IETF speak. So if you look for the big banner with all the different buttons, and you can identify which languages you speak if you're willing to reach out to others that speak that language. Some specific resources for newcomers. The first is the TAO of the IETF. It has been updated recently, so we have a 2019 edition. It's available on the website at this link, and it basically is the novice's guide to the IETF. Gives you a lot of interesting information, folklore, that kind of thing. There is, and if you've registered, I know that you've received links to this in email, but there is a newcomers information page for IETF 105, and that gives you links to all of the various newcomers activities. There are, this tutorial and previous tutorials, both technical, process-oriented, and newcomer-related. There's a whole bunch of old tutorials previously that were done that are available at the link for tutorials. Some more meeting resources. There is a meeting wiki. There's a number of things that are available on the meeting wiki, and folks can contribute to it as they need to. One of the most important things, we alluded earlier to the side meetings and this sort of open free time. This is where the IETF is experimenting with this agenda to allow for more support for side meetings and those kinds of things. All of that scheduling is done on IETF 105 on the meeting wiki.
Just quick jump in, Karen. Also, ride shares to and from the airport are also scheduled through there. So
yes, that's very true.
You can be, 6 people crammed in a cab headed to the airport for the same flight home is a good way to socialize with your colleagues.
Yeah, there's several sections in the wiki that will help you with those kinds of things. There is a first-time attendees mailing list. And I just realized the thing we don't have on here, there is also an attendees mailing list for the whole meeting. And you can opt in or opt out of that mailing list at the point at which you register, and then you can always go and add yourself back in later. But the point of that mailing list is, meeting specific information. And this can, range from anywhere from discussions about where the best local coffee shop is to, how to control the alarm clock in your bedroom. The range of conversations that can show up on the attendees list is two relevant technical topics as well, but it's a wide-ranging list associated with issues associated with the meeting. IETF Sisters, we talked about a little earlier. IETF Sister, that's a blog post about the sisters, and then from there you can get information on how to join the mailing list. It is a very informal group of women that get together to sort of support each other and talk about sister related things. We do have a couple of sister activities that are at the IETF. There's a Monday networking breakfast, which is very informal, like, coffee and pastries and sort of getting to know each other. And then later in the week, we have our traditional event, which is our Thursday lunch. And both of those are open to folks that want to attend that. There are a number of other mailing lists that potentially associated with the meeting. And some of those are available there, things like travel companions. Sometimes, it depends. Some meetings have like a running list or a group of people that are interested in doing something specific and coordinating that, and they'll spin up a separate mailing list for that. Next, having said all of that, probably the single most important link that you need to know about is the data tracker. All of the documents in the IETF, all of the meeting materials, the agenda for the meeting, the charter, all of the assets associated with the IETF are available via the data tracker. And I put a link in earlier about where the slides would be later, and I pointed to the materials page. Well, the materials page is part of the data tracker. So that's the one tool. I mean, you can look at individual working groups, and then you can look at past meetings for those working groups, the agenda for the current meeting. Pretty much everything that you need would be there. There's also the tools page, which is sort of the experimental piece of data tracker. So a lot of times things are developed on tools and then eventually transitioned somehow into the data tracker. But it's a different, slightly different packaging of some of the same information, and then some additional tools are available there as well. Both of those are very handy to have. Remote participation. We didn't check to see how many of you all would be physically on site versus remote. Obviously, attendance at IETF meetings is not required. We have people that have participated actively in working groups for years that have never been to a face-to-face meeting. Our remote participation is provided by MeetEcho. This is the tool that we're currently using for this webinar. And it is through MeetEcho, you can schedule presentations. You can present in a working group, provided that you do all the advanced stuff that you need to do. You can get in a virtual queue and ask your questions. There's a number of and then afterwards, all of the recordings from all of the meetings are put up on YouTube. There is currently no cost to participate remotely. You are asked to register, and there's instructions for that. That's true. And they do an amazing job, so say thank you if you see them. The network at the IETF does run its own event network, and sometimes we run part of the hotel network as well, depending on the circumstances. It's generally up and running by Friday afternoon, early Saturday, and it's taken down around noon on Friday of the meeting, depending on when the last activities run. We do run a number of wireless SSIDs for different purposes. We're currently discussing, how we should actually be doing this going forward. There is an IETF legacy network, and basically it's a fully open network. It's our way to transition from open networks to encrypted networks. We do have a quiet workspace, the space formerly known as the terminal room. It doesn't actually have any terminals. It does have power and a wired Ethernet connectivity. It used to also have the printer and the help desk. The last IETF, we moved the printer and the help desk into the registration area for more visibility. There is a ticketing system that if you have any problems with any part of the meeting, actually not just the network, you can use the ticketing system. So if you're having issues with whatever, and the Secretariat and the NOC team manage that. There's also going to be a network requirements BOF this time if you're interested in what the technical requirements of the network should be going forward. Encourage you to attend that. We also use Jabber. How are we on time? Oh, wow, 4 minutes. We use XMPP for chat rooms. Every IETF session has an associated chat room. The chat room is used to help facilitate remote participation. And, sometimes, some meetings it's used just for that. Other meetings, it's also sort of a secondary conversation point. So you can ask questions and sort of have a second parallel conversation related to the discussion in the room. So finally, I was good on time then. We're at the end of this. Above all, enjoy the meeting. If you have any questions or concerns or whatever, feel free to reach out to us. We are definitely interested in your feedback. We have a survey. The survey should be, I hope, online now. And we encourage you to provide any feedback there. Also, we do have a feedback session on Thursday morning. I'm going to apologize in advance because I realized it's scheduled from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. So somehow we didn't manage to slide it later an hour when everything else moved later an hour. But come to the Thursday morning feedback session and we'll give you coffee and breakfast and you can tell us what we missed. So are there any, it's not yet actually, okay, I'll have to double check with Alexa, but there will be a survey very shortly at that link. Any other final questions? No? Well, Rich and I definitely appreciate you all coming. We hope you have an excellent meeting. And we need new participants. The work gets done by volunteers, and so you are very important to the future of the IETF.
Yes, exactly.
Any final? Oh, yeah, exactly. And on that note, at 8:58 a.m. my time, we can thank you all and be sure to say hi at the IETF. Yes, you can join remotely. Look for the remote participation information on the website. Oh, yes, it'll be available in the materials page and it'll be available via the agenda, and I'll get that up after this session.
Yeah, it's the same, as Karen said, it's the same deck that's going to be presented. So if you look at the agenda and go to the tutorial, but we'll send out the link too. Oh, ANR, no, I don't believe ANRW has got remote facilities. Positive of that.
Oh, he's asking about the ANRW conference.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't actually know.
Yeah, I don't think so. What I would do is go to the registration link. Oh, sorry, Tobia knows. Yes, it's going to be streamed. Awesome.
Excellent.
That's great. Didn't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Okay.
All right.
All right. See you in Montreal.